Cabins were close, the decks cold and windy. There was nothing to see and nothing to do. Katy and Clover agreed that they never wanted to see a canal boat again. They were helpful to Mrs. Peters, amused the boys, and kept them out of mischief, and she told her husband that she really thought she shouldn't have lived through the journey if it hadn't been for the Miss Carrs. They were such kind girls and so fond of children. But the 3 days were terribly long. At last they ended. Buffalo was reached in time for the lake boat, and once established on board, feeling the rapid motion and knowing that each stroke of the paddles took them nearer home, the girls were rewarded for their long trial of patience. At 4 o'clock the next afternoon Burnett was in sight. Long before they touched the wharf, Clover discovered old Whitey in the carryall and Alexander waiting for them among the crowd of carriages. Standing on the edge of the dock appeared a well-known figure. "Papa! Papa!" she shrieked. It seemed as if the girls could not wait for the boat to stop and the plank to be lowered. How delightful it was to feel papa again! Such a sense of home and comfort and shelter as came with his touch. "I'll never go away from you again. Never, never," repeated Clover, keeping tight hold of his hand as they drove up the hill. Dr. Carr, as he gazed at his girls, was equally happy. They were so bright, affectionate, and loving. No, he could never spare them again, for the boarding school or anything else, he thought. "You must be very tired," he said. "Not a bit. I'm hardly ever tired now," replied Katy. "Oh, dear, I forgot to thank Mr. Peters for taking care of us," said Clover. "Never mind, I did it for you," answered her father. "Oh, that baby," she continued. "How glad I am it has gone to Toledo and I needn't hear it cry any more. Katy, Katy, there's home! We're at the gate!" The girls looked eagerly out, but no children were visible. They hurried up the gravel path, under the locust boughs just beginning to bud. There, over the front door, was an arch of evergreens, with Katy and Clover upon it in scarlet letters, and as they reached the porch the door flew open and out poured the children in a tumultuous little crowd. They had been on the roof, looking through a spyglass after the boat. "We never knew you had come until we heard the gate," explained John and Dorry, while Elsie hugged Clover and Phil, locking his arms around Katy's neck, took his feet off the floor and swung them in an ecstasy of affection until she begged for mercy. "How you are grown! Dorry, you're as tall as I am! Elsie, darling, how well you look! Oh, isn't it delicious, delicious, delicious to be at home again?" There was such a hubbub of endearments and explanations that Dr. Carr could hardly make himself heard. "Clover, your waist has grown as small as a pin. You look just like the beautiful princess in Elsie's story," said Johnny. "Take the girls into the parlor," repeated Dr. Carr. "It is cold out here with the door open." "Take 'em upstairs. You don't know what is upstairs," shouted Phil, whereupon Elsie frowned and shook her head at him. The parlor was gay with daffodils and hyacinths in vases of blue violets which smelt delightfully. Cecy had helped arrange them, Elsie said, and just at that moment Cecy herself came in. Her hair was arranged in a sort of pincushion of puffs with a row of curls on top, where no curls used to grow, and her appearance generally was very fine and fashionable, but she was the same affectionate Cecy as ever, and hugged the girls and danced round them as she used to do at 12. She had waited until they had had time to kiss once all round, she said, and then she really couldn't wait any longer. "Now come upstairs," suggested Elsie when Clover had warmed her feet and the flowers had been admired, and everybody had said 10 times over how nice it was to have the girls back, and the girls had replied that it was just as nice to come back. So they all went upstairs, Elsie leading the way. "Where are you going?" cried Katy. "That's the blue room." But Elsie did not pause. "You see," she explained, with the doorknob in her hand, "Papa and I thought you ought to have a bigger room now, because you are grown-up young ladies. So we have fixed this for you, and your old one is going to be the spare room instead." Then she threw the door open and led the girls in. "See, Katy," she said, "this is your bureau, and this is Clover's. And look what nice drawers Papa has had put in the closet. 2 for you and 2 for her. Aren't they convenient? Don't you like it? And isn't it a great deal pleasanter than the old room?" "Oh, a great deal," cried the girls. "It is delightful, everything about it." All Katy's old treasures had been transferred from her old quarters to this. There was her cushioned chair, her table, her bookshelf, the pictures from the walls. There were some new things, too. A blue carpet, blue paper on the walls, window curtains of fresh chintz, and Elsie had made a tasteful pincushion for each bureau, and Johnny crocheted mats for the washstand. Altogether it was as pretty a bower as 2 sisters just grown into ladies could desire. "What are those lovely things hanging on either side of the bed?" asked Clover. They were 2 illuminated texts, sent as a welcome home by Cousin Helen. One was a morning text and the other an evening text, Elsie explained. The evening text, which bore the words, "I will lay me down to sleep and take my rest, for it is thou, Lord, only, who makest me dwell in safety," was painted in soft purples and grays, and among the poppies and silver lilies which wreathed it appeared a cunning little downy bird, fast asleep, with his head under his wing. The morning text, "When I awake, I am still with thee," was in bright colors, scarlet and blue and gold, and had a frame of rose garlands and wide awake looking butterflies and hummingbirds. The girls thought they had never seen anything so pretty. Such a gay supper as they had that night! Katy would not take her old place at the tea tray. She wanted to know how Elsie looked as housekeeper, she said. So she sat on one side of papa, and Clover on the other, and Elsie poured the tea, with a mixture of delight and dignity which was worth seeing. "I'll begin to-morrow," said Katy. And with that morrow, when she came out of her pretty room and took her place once more as manager of the household, her grown-up life may be said to have begun. So it is time that I should cease to write about her. Grown-up lives may be very interesting, but they have no rightful place in a child's book. If little girls will forget to be little, and take it upon them to become young ladies, they must bear the consequences, one of which is that we can follow their fortunes no longer. I wrote these last words sitting in the same green meadow where the first words of What Katy Did were written. A year had passed, but a cardinal flower which seemed the same stood looking at itself in the brook, and from the bulrush bed sounded tiny voices. My little goggle-eyed friends were discussing Katy and her conduct, as they did then, but with less spirit. For one voice came seldom and faintly, while the other, bold and defiant as ever, repeated over and over again, "Katy didn't! Katy didn't! She didn't! "Katy did," sounded faintly from the farther rush. "She didn't! She didn't!" chirped the undaunted partisan. Silence followed. His opponent was either convinced or tired of the discussion. Katy didn't. The words repeated themselves in my mind as I walked homeward. How much room for didn'ts there is in the world, I thought. What an important part they play. And how glad I am that, with all her own and other people's doings, so many of these didn'ts were included among the things which my Katy did at school. End of Chapter 13. End of What Katy Did at School.